The rough wool of my dress scratched against my skin like a constant reminder of my place in this world, and my hands trembled as the guards dragged me through corridors I had only ever cleaned on my knees. I did not know then that before the sun set, every soul in the kingdom of Valdrin would kneel before me. The fabric of my sleeves had been mended so many times that the threads formed a patchwork of different browns, each repair marking a year of my life in the castle kitchens. I was 17, and I had been scrubbing pots since my fingers were strong enough to hold a brush. The head cook, old Petra, had found me wailing in a basket by the servants' entrance when I was merely days old. No note, no name, nothing but a scrap of white fur clutched in my tiny fist, which Petra had kept in a small box and given to me on my 10th birthday. I still carried it against my heart, tucked into the lining of my dress, though I never understood why it brought me such comfort. The great hall loomed before me, its ancient doors carved with wolves and moons and symbols, whose meaning had been lost to time. I had glimpsed this place only through cracked doorways while delivering bread, never daring to step inside. The stone beneath my bare feet was cold, so cold it seemed to seep into my bones and settle there like a warning. Hundreds of nobles lined the walls in their silks and velvets, their jewels catching the torchlight like scattered stars. And at the far end, upon a throne of black iron, sat Alpha Pyrus. He was watching me with those pale eyes that held no warmth, only calculation. Pyrus had ruled Valdrin for 18 years, ever since the night the true royal family had perished in what the histories called the Great Fire. He was not old, perhaps 40, but cruelty had carved deep lines into his face. His wolf, a massive gray beast, lay at his feet, and even from across the hall I could feel the animal's gaze upon me. "Why am I here?" I wanted to scream. "I am no one. I am nothing." But the guard's grip on my arms allowed no resistance, and so I stumbled forward, my patched dress dragging against the polished floor. The ceremony of the sacred altar was the most important ritual in Valdrin, held once each year on the winter solstice. Every young person of noble blood was required to touch the ancient stone that stood at the heart of the great hall, a massive block of white marble veined with silver that had been there since before the castle was built. The altar was said to recognize true lineage, to glow for those of royal blood, though it had not shone for anyone since the old queen died. It was tradition. It was law. And it had nothing to do with orphans from the kitchen. Pyrus rose from his throne, and the hall fell silent. His voice carried like the crack of a whip. "I thought we might add some entertainment to today's ceremony," he announced, and scattered laughter rippled through the crowd. "Our little kitchen rat believes herself too good to know her place. She was caught last week sneaking bread to the village children instead of disposing of the scraps as ordered." He paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. "Perhaps the altar will teach her what happens to those who forget they are nothing." My cheeks burned with shame, but I forced myself to stand straight. I had given that bread to children who were starving, children whose parents had been taxed into poverty by Pyrus himself. I would not apologize for it. A noblewoman near the front whispered loudly to her companion, "Look at that dress. Is it made of potato sacks?" The laughter that followed was louder this time, more vicious. I felt each sound like a physical blow, but I had endured worse. The kitchens had taught me to survive. Pyrus descended from his throne and walked toward me, his boots echoing against the stone. When he reached me, he circled slowly, examining my patched sleeves, my bare feet, the places where the fabric had worn thin enough to show the skin beneath. "Exquisite craftsmanship," he mocked, "truly fit for a queen." The hall erupted in laughter once more, and I felt something hot and fierce building in my chest. Not shame this time. Anger. Pure burning anger. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the altar, and the crowd parted before us like water. Up close, the white stone was even more magnificent than I had imagined. It seemed to pulse with an inner light, though perhaps that was just the torches reflecting off its polished surface. Ancient words were carved into its base, words in a language I did not recognize, but somehow felt I should know. "Touch it," Pyrus commanded, shoving me forward. "Show everyone what happens when nothing touches sacred stone." I stumbled and caught myself against the altar's edge. The marble was warm beneath my palms, warm in a way that stone should not be. For a moment, everything went still. The laughter faded. The whispers ceased. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Then I felt it. A vibration deep within the stone, like a heartbeat awakening after a long sleep. The warmth spread up through my hands, into my arms, through my chest until it reached the scrap of white fur I had carried since childhood. That small piece of fur began to grow hot against my skin, and I gasped as light erupted from the altar. Not the soft glow the histories described. This was blinding, radiant, a pillar of silver light that shot toward the vaulted ceiling and illuminated every corner of the great hall. The nobles screamed and stumbled backward. Pyrus himself fell back, his pale eyes wide with what I realized was terror. The light poured into me and through me, and suddenly I could see things I had never seen before. I saw a woman with my face wearing a crown of silver, her hand resting on the head of a white wolf. I saw a night of fire and blood, soldiers in Pyrus colors storming the royal chambers. I saw a nursemaid fleeing through secret passages with a baby clutched to her chest, leaving that child in a basket by the kitchen door with nothing but a scrap of white fur to remember her birthright. I saw my mother. I saw myself. The visions faded, but the light did not. It surrounded me like a cocoon, like armor, like the embrace of something ancient and powerful that had been waiting for me all along. And then I heard it. A howl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. A sound that resonated in my very bones. From the shadows behind the altar, a shape emerged. A wolf, but not like any wolf I had ever seen. He was massive, larger than a horse, with fur as white as fresh snow and eyes that burned like amber flames. He moved with a grace that seemed impossible for a creature of his size, and as he approached me, the nobles pressed themselves against the walls in terror. The white wolf stopped before me and lowered his great head. When he spoke, his voice was not sound but feeling, words that formed directly in my mind. "I have waited 18 years for you, daughter of the true queen. I am the guardian of the rightful line, and I am yours." I reached out with a trembling hand and touched his fur. It was soft, impossibly soft, and warm with the same warmth that still radiated from the altar. In that moment, I understood everything. The scrap of fur I had carried all my life had come from him, left with me so that I would always carry a piece of my heritage close to my heart. The light from the altar began to fade, but something else was happening now. One by one, the nobles were sinking to their knees. Not from fear, I realized, but from recognition. The altar had spoken. The guardian had returned. There could be no doubt about what it meant. Only Pyrus remained standing, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. "This is a trick," he snarled. "She is nothing. A kitchen rat. A bastard child of some servant who probably stole that fur from the old queen's chambers." The white wolf turned his burning gaze upon the Alpha, and Pyrus flinched as if struck. "I know the scent of the true bloodline," the guardian said, and this time his voice resonated through the hall so all could hear. "I knew it 18 years ago when your soldiers murdered my queen and her consort. I knew it when the nursemaid Petra carried the infant princess to safety. And I know it now, standing before the rightful heir to Valdrin. Petra, old Petra, who had raised me, who had protected me, who had died in her sleep just 3 years ago, taking her secrets with her. She had known. All along she had known." Pyrus drew his sword, and his gray wolf rose to its feet, hackles raised. "If she is truly of the bloodline, then she will die as her parents did. I will not surrender my throne to a child in rags." He lunged at me, blade gleaming in the torchlight. But the white guardian moved faster than thought, placing himself between us. The gray wolf leaped to meet him, and for a terrible moment, the two beasts clashed in a fury of teeth and claws. But the guardian was ancient, powerful beyond measure, and the gray wolf was merely mortal. Within seconds, Pyrus Wolf lay whimpering on the ground, defeated but alive. The guardian turned back to Pyrus, who stood frozen with his sword still raised. "Yield," the great wolf commanded, "or face the judgment you escaped 18 years ago." I watched the Alpha who had mocked me, who had humiliated me, who had murdered my family and stolen everything that should have been mine. The anger was still there, burning in my chest like an ember that had been carefully tended for 17 years. I could let the guardian kill him. I could order his execution, and no one in this hall would dare object. It would be justice. It would be right. But as I looked at him, I saw something else beneath the cruelty and the arrogance. I saw fear. The fear of a man who had built his entire life on a foundation of lies and blood, and who was now watching it crumble around him. Killing him would be easy. Killing him would be satisfying, but it would make me no different from him. The anger in my chest did not disappear, but it transformed into something else, something that felt like strength. "Lower your sword," I said, and my voice carried through the hall with an authority I did not know I possessed. "You will face judgment for your crimes, Pyrus, but not from tooth and claw. You will face the justice of the realm you claim to rule." For a long moment, he did not move. Then slowly, his sword clattered to the ground. His knees followed, and the man who had been Alpha of Valdrin knelt before me in the dress he had mocked, surrounded by the nobles who had laughed at my patches. The hall was utterly silent. I looked at the sea of faces before me, nobles and servants alike who had gathered to witness the ceremony. Many of them had laughed at me mere minutes ago. Many of them had looked the other way while Pyrus brutalized the common people. But many of them were also victims, trapped under a tyrant's rule, too afraid to resist. "I am Ophelia," I said, and the name felt different now, heavier somehow, imbued with meaning. "I am the daughter of Queen Oriana and King Percival, the last of the true bloodline. I did not ask for this crown, and I do not pretend to know how to rule. But I know what it is to be hungry. I know what it is to be mocked for circumstances beyond my control. I know what it is to watch children starve while the powerful feast." I paused, meeting as many eyes as I could. "The kingdom I build will not be one where orphans are left in baskets by kitchen doors. It will not be one where bread is thrown away while children go hungry. And it will not be one where anyone, noble or common, is humiliated for the clothes on their back." The white guardian pressed his great head against my side, and I felt his approval flow through me like warmth. "You are your mother's daughter," he said in my mind. "She would be proud." Tears pricked at my eyes, but I did not let them fall. There would be time for tears later. Time for grief for the parents I never knew. For Petra, who had given her life to protect me. For the childhood that had been stolen from me by the man now kneeling at my feet. But this moment required strength. A noble near the front of the crowd rose to his feet, an elderly man with kind eyes and silver hair. He approached me slowly and drew a silk cloak from his shoulders. It was deep blue, embroidered with silver moons. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I served your mother. I have carried the guilt of my cowardice for 18 years, for I did nothing when Pyrus came to power." He held out the cloak. "Please allow me to begin my penance by ensuring that you never again have to wear a dress that brings you shame." I looked at the cloak, then at my patched and mended dress. For a moment, I was tempted to accept. But then I shook my head. "This dress was made by Petra," I said. "She mended it every year as I grew, always finding scraps that would hold together for another season. I will wear it to my coronation. I will wear it as a reminder of where I came from, and as a promise of the queen I intend to be." The old noble smiled, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. He bowed deeply, and around him others began to bow as well. Not the reluctant, fear-driven kneeling of before, but genuine reverence, genuine hope. The days that followed passed in a blur of activity. Pyrus was imprisoned to await trial, his supporters scattered like leaves before a winter wind. The White Guardian rarely left my side, and his presence gave me courage when my own faltered. I learned that his name was Orphan, that he had guarded my family for generations beyond counting, and that he had waited in a state between sleep and waking for the moment when the true bloodline would touch the altar again. On the night before my coronation, I stood on the balcony of the Queen's chambers, the rooms my mother had once occupied. The kingdom stretched out before me, villages and forests and mountains touched by the silver light of the moon. Orphan lay beside me, his white fur almost luminous in the darkness. "Are you ready?" he asked. I thought about the question. Was I ready to rule a kingdom I had only ever seen from the kitchen? Was I ready to make decisions that would affect thousands of lives? Was I ready to be a queen when I had spent my entire life as a servant? No, I admitted. But I don't think anyone ever is. I placed my hand on his warm fur. I only know that I cannot let fear stop me from trying. Too many people are counting on me. Too many children are going hungry while I doubt myself. Orphan rumbled with what I had learned was laughter. Your mother said something similar the night before her coronation. She was terrified, but she became the greatest queen Valdrin had ever known. I smiled, feeling my mother's presence in that moment as surely as I felt the stone beneath my feet. Then I will try to make her proud. The coronation was held in the Great Hall, with the sacred altar as my witness. I wore my patched dress, as I had promised, though someone had carefully cleaned it and sewn the royal crest over my heart. The crown was lighter than I expected, a delicate circlet of silver that had belonged to my mother and her mother before her. When it touched my brow, the altar glowed softly, and throughout the hall, I heard gasps and whispers of wonder. But the true beginning came later, after the ceremonies and the feasts, after the nobles had sworn their oaths, and the common people had been invited into the castle for the first time in 18 years. I stood in the throne room with Orphan at my side, looking at the black iron throne that Pyrus had occupied for so long. "We should replace it," I said. "Something that doesn't look like it was forged in darkness." Orphan tilted his great head. "What would you prefer?" I thought about it for a long moment. "A chair," I finally said. "Just an ordinary chair. Something that reminds me that a queen is just a person with a heavy responsibility, not a god to be worshipped." The old guardian made that rumbling sound again. "Your grandmother said the same thing. She was overruled by the council." I smiled. "Then it seems I have some work to do with the council." The kingdom did not transform overnight. Change never does. But slowly, steadily, the darkness that Pyrus had cultivated began to lift. Food was distributed to the hungry. Orphanages were established and properly funded. The nobles learned that cruelty would no longer be tolerated, and the common people learned that their voices would be heard. On the first anniversary of my coronation, I returned to the kitchen where I had grown up. The head cook now was a young woman named Paloma, who had been a scullery maid alongside me before everything changed. She curtsied when I entered, but I pulled her into an embrace instead. "None of that," I said. "Not here. Not between us." We sat at the worn wooden table where I had eaten 1,000 meals, and Paloma served me the same simple porridge I had eaten as a child. Orphan lay in the corner, his amber eyes watching with quiet amusement. "Do you ever miss it?" Paloma asked. "The simplicity?" I considered the question. "Every day," I admitted. "But then I remember the children who are no longer starving. I remember the families who are no longer torn apart by unjust laws. I remember that I have the power to help, and that with power comes responsibility." I looked at her. "I am tired, Paloma. I am tired in ways I never knew were possible. But I am also more fulfilled than I ever imagined I could be." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Petra would be so proud of you. Tears sprang to my eyes at the mention of the woman who had raised me. I know, I whispered. I feel her with me still. Her and my mother. They guide me when I am lost. That night, I walked through the castle gardens with Oren at my side. The moon was full, casting silver light across the flowers and fountains. In the distance, I could hear laughter from the village, a sound that had been rare under Pyrus rule, but had become common in the year since my coronation. Do you ever regret it? I asked Oren. Binding yourself to my bloodline? Waiting centuries for us? The great wolf was quiet for a moment. I was created for this purpose, he finally said. To guard the true rulers of Valdrin, to guide them, to protect them. When your mother died, I thought my purpose had ended. I prepared to fade into nothingness. But then I felt you, a tiny spark of the bloodline still alive, hidden in the very heart of the castle. His amber eyes met mine. I waited 18 years in the shadows, watching you grow, unable to reveal myself until you touched the altar. There were times I feared you would not survive. Times I feared Pyrus would discover the truth. But you persevered. You grew strong. And when the moment came, you proved yourself worthy of everything I had hoped. I leaned against his warm side, feeling the steady rhythm of his ancient heart. What happens now? I asked. We have accomplished so much, but there is still so much more to do. Now, Oren said, we continue. One day at a time. One decision at a time. One act of kindness at a time. That is how kingdoms are built, not through grand gestures, but through the accumulation of small choices made with wisdom and compassion. I nodded, looking up at the stars that scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. In the kitchen, I used to dream of a different life, I said. I did not dare to dream of this, of crowns and wolves and ancient magic. I dreamed only of enough food to eat, of a dress without patches, of a single day without being mocked for my poverty. And now, Oren asked, now I dream of a kingdom where no child has to dream so small, where every orphan knows they have value, where every hungry belly is filled and every voice is heard. I smiled, feeling the weight of the crown I would wear again tomorrow and all the days after. It is a bigger dream, but I think we can make it real. The white wolf pressed his head against my shoulder. We will, he promised. Together. I stood in the garden for a long time after that, listening to the laughter from the village, feeling the warmth of my guardian against my side, wearing the memory of my patched dress like a badge of honor rather than a mark of shame. The girl who had been mocked for her rags had become a queen who chose to remember her origins. The orphan who had been told she was nothing had discovered she was everything. And somewhere, in whatever realm the dead inhabited, I knew my mother was smiling.